Hi there. 8th February 2024. Today I want to cover a little story that came across the transom about how one state's attempt to police girls' and women's bodies is working out for them. And not just trans bodies, all bodies. So here's this story. I guess I gotta hit the old present thing and get that whole thing going. Tab, Utah School Board. Yeah, there we go. So here we go. Utah School Board member Natalie Klein questions high school athlete's gender, causing social media uproar. It's more than a social media uproar because the police got involved. So let's just dig into this a wee bit. Maybe read the story. I'll move some stuff around so I can read the story. You all can see me doing it. This is, good illustration of how headline writers sort of bury the lead. Golly, I'm having screen issues right now. All right, so Republican Representative Kira Birkeland. Okay, so this is a school board member, Natalie Klein, who apparently Ms. Klein is a bit of a Delta Bravo. Let me get this thing over here so I can just questions high school students, athletes, gender, causing social media uproar. Republican Kira Birkeland, this is in Utah, right? Who led the charge against transgender girls competing in Utah high school sports, also weighed in. It'll be interesting I think you'll find it interesting how Ms. Birkeland, who led the charge, weighs in. This story is by Courtney Tanner, and it came out yesterday at 6:35 p.m., updated this morning, apparently early this morning. A Utah high school student needs police protection. Generally speaking, police protection doesn't take place on Twitter or X or Blue Sky. It takes place in the streets. Utah high school student needs police protection after a state school board member publicly singled out and suggested the student was transgender without evidence, inciting threats from her followers on social media. Natalie Klein later apologized, but not before many commentators personally attacked the player. The student school district had to provide extra security for her, and the lawmaker who wrote the state's anti-transgender athlete bill weighed in, sharing private information, possibly in violation of her own measure. The latest post from Klein, who has repeatedly come under fire for her controversial posts, came late Tuesday. Yeah. Setting off 16 hours of hateful speculation that continued even after she deleted it Wednesday afternoon. Here's an example, folks, of what, I take it back. it doesn't do much good. Cat's out of the bag. You got 16 hours of people dogpiling on a high school kid who is alleged to be transgender without evidence. What evidence do you need? You know, it's like Wednesday afternoon. It also prompted a strong statement from Utah Governor Spencer Cox, who signed the goddamn bill, and Lieutenant Governor Deirdre Henderson, who, of course, supports the fucking bill, condemning Klein's unconscionable behavior and calling for the school board to take action against her. Klein's original post included a flyer for high school high school girls basketball team in Salt Lake County on her public Facebook page. The ultra-conservative and outspoken member of the Utah State Board of Education wrote, quote, "Girls basketball," unquote, implying that one of the players was not female, suggesting she shouldn't be able to play. The girl is a minor. To protect the identity of the athlete, the Salt Lake Tribune is not naming the school. The comment section quickly became filled with people calling out the player, naming her, threatening her, and referring to her with vulgar language. Some identified her school and said they were going to call the principal. Granite School District, which covers the school the student attends, said in a statement that it has significant concerns with Klein's post and has been working to ensure the student's safety and support her. State Representative Kira Birkeland, Republican of Morgan, Utah, was one of the few voices in the comments criticizing Klein for the post. Birkeland led the charge against transgender girls competing in high school sports, sponsoring HB 11 in 2022 that banned them from girls' teams. So here we have the sponsor of this legislation being outraged that some bigot would allege that a high school girl was trans without any knowledge of the girl, her life, whether she is in fact trans or not, any goddamn thing. Why? Because she looked a little too butch. Since her measure was passed by the legislature in a vote overriding the governor's veto, there have been a slew of accusations from parents and others trying to call out players they think might be transgender at schools across the state. Folks, I just want to tell you, this is one of the first things I started saying when these bills were first introduced on the what, you know, being a woman of a certain age would call the right-wing mimeograph machine. Writing these, you know, Heritage Foundation, writing up this model legislation and shoving it out to every state legislator who allies with them in the entire nation to push through state houses. This is exactly what I and many other people were saying was going to happen. Not because of people being trans, but of the intransigent lingering of policing, particularly women's gender presentation. It's not just going to affect trans kids. It's going to affect all kids. It's not going to affect just kids. It's going to affect all of us. And it's happening. And it's no surprise. Last month, the father of a junior varsity girls basketball player confronted administrators demanding, a parent, demanding that one of the girls not be allowed to play because he believed she was transgender. The girl was not the same athlete from Klein's post. So this is not a isolated incident, something weird, something rare. It's giving bigots, giving misogynists a free pass to challenge any girl, giving parents of sore losers a free pass to say, my kid was beat by a tranny. No, I know they won't use that language, but that's what they're thinking. Everybody wants to be so damn polite. But these people aren't polite. They're not polite at all. They won't give anybody grace to be who they are. Trans or cis, they don't care. Other similar incidents have occurred, including another in 2022, where two parents challenged the gender of a girl who had beaten their children at a track meet. But the Utah High School Activities Association has so far not released any data on their frequency. USHAA determined in that first case, after pulling the second student's record back to kindergarten, that she has always been female. That is also the case with the girl Klein questioned, according to Equality Utah. Klein later updated her apology to include that, but continued to discuss the girl's body. She does have a larger build like her parents, Klein wrote. We live in strange times when it is normal to pause and wonder if people are what they say they are because of the push to normalize transgenderism in our society. Honey, that ain't it. You've invented transgenderism in your mind. There are transgender people. How we accommodate trans people in society, how we view them, how they view themselves is surely a matter to think about, consider. But legislating a carte blanche approach to anybody who says that this person is trans and therefore they must be discriminated against, even if they're not trans, even if, it belies what are the markers of that. The Utah Bathroom Bill, which affects all people, lacks the kind of enforcement mechanism aside from someone supposes or suspects that this person is trans. Call the police. This is an issue. Klein also said she talked to the father in the other recent case. As a lawsuit against Brooklyn's bill moves forward, athletes currently must provide their birth certificate documenting their age and gender to be able to play in Utah, or for transgender girls, provide documentation showing they have undergone at least a year of hormone therapy. In the cases that have drawn public attention, the school districts have said that the targeted athletes have met the requirements. Brooklyn cited Utah laws regarding student athletes and said Wednesday on Klein's post that the state board member was acting in poor taste in her comments about the player. Has anyone talked to the student, the parents, or the school? She wrote. Do you know if this kid is a boy or a girl? I think David Bowie right now. This child is a minor being mocked and called out with any facts or proof. This is the legislator knocking this school board person for being a dick. But what did you expect? You provide no mechanism aside from the expression of dissatisfaction with this person or that person being on a girls' team. And note, it's never boys. It's always girls. It's the policing of women in their presentation, in their appearance, in their bodies. Which, as we all know, come in all shapes and sizes. I don't know this kid's story. This is apparently a tweet post on the shitter. I don't know this kid's story, and I find this post in poor taste. We do have laws regarding student athletics. The commission has had at least 4 student athletes come before it, and all 4 have been denied participation on the team that doesn't align with their sex at birth. This post should be deleted and apology expressed. The representative who introduced her bill, which expressly forbade the kind of action she made in revealing the hearings of this commission, she just broke her own law. In a later edit to her comment, Birkeland added a demand that Klein apologize and delete that post. Klein did, which is also not something the school board member has done often after making controversial public remarks. In that new post, she wrote, "To protect the player, I have removed the post. My deepest apologies for the negative attention my post drew to innocent students and their families, including having to provide police protection to both, and administrative efforts in her school." Folks, this is a 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old kid. Can you imagine? I can only hope she has the support of her teammates and her friends. But I think that if you'll reflect on your high school or younger junior high school days, you can imagine that this kid has been singled out by a member of her school board and targeted for bullying, starting at the top. And this is the consequence of this law, the way it's structured, the way it's handled, giving carte blanche to people who want to be in the position to judging who and who is not girly enough to play basketball or anything else. Did Birkeland break a rule with her response? At the same time, Birkeland may have violated the provisions of her own bill with her comments, which revealed protected information. In a response to Klein, Birkeland referenced the commission that currently is charged with hearing the cases of any transgender girl who wants to play on the high school girls' sports teams. She said it had at least 4 transgender students come before it, and that all 4 have been denied participation on the team that doesn't align with their sex at birth. That aligns with what parents have said about going before the commission, saying the standards seem impassable for any kid to be allowed to play. But the specific rulings on their cases have never been publicly revealed before. A player's name, as well as any rulings even detached from a specific name, are considered protected records under the language of Birkeland's measure that created the School Activity Eligibility Commission. This is not a death panel. This is a sex panel, folks. I mean, golly jeez. The law notes that any determinations made by the commission are done so in closed session and are to be shared only with the athlete and their local athletic association for purposes of confirming eligibility to play. Now, if you're going to have a rule like this, that makes sense. That's actually how it works at more elevated levels as well. These are eligibility concerns, even rising up to the Olympic Games, the World Federation, the World Championship Olympics level. If there's a question of eligibility, there's a process, and that process is not a wide open one. Why is that? Ever heard of HIPAA? Ever heard of medical records? Ever heard of that kind of privacy that is afforded to each and every one of us? The law notes that any determinations made by the commission are done so in closed session or to be shared only with the athlete and local athletic association for purposes of confirming eligibility to play. There is provision in state records law that allows members of the Utah legislature to receive protected records. So where did this legislator get this stuff? Because she could. It is unclear how Birkeland seems to be familiar with the commission's otherwise protected rulings. Under state records law, it notes that a person, including a public employee or other person who has lawful access to any private, controlled, or protected record, who intentionally discloses records that are classified as protected, could be charged with a Class B misdemeanor. In other words, you might have been irresponsible. The Utah Attorney General's office, which oversees the Transgender Sports Eligibility Commission, has previously declined to provide numbers on how many cases there have been and how those were decided, citing the privacy concerns of the law. Excuse me, a little cough there. The office declined to comment on the issue Wednesday, and Birkeland did not respond to requests from the Tribune. A spokesman for the Utah House only stated, "I believe Natalie Klein has since deleted her post." Big what? There's still cops protecting a kid because of her post. And cited past Tribune reporting on commission hearings. The Tribune has previously noted that the commission appears to have talked about 4 student cases based on discussions during their open portions where students have been identified as student A, student B, student C, student D. The commission is required to follow open meetings law, so it must post agenda and minutes from its discussion. It has met 6 times. Chair of the Trans Sports Commission. The Trans Sports Commission. Sports medicine physician Dr. Michael Henry, who did not respond to a request, also did not respond to a request for comment yesterday, on Birkeland's disclosure of the rulings in those cases. Klein's post is not the first of hers to draw attention since she took her seat on the 15-member board that oversees public education in the state. So this is a state-level Like, state level commissioner. She was first elected in November 2020 in the Republican firebrand. Firebrand. You're finding out now why this nutbag is still a school board member. This is a state school board. Holy shit. Republican firebrand has continued to share controversial opinions on social media, endangering kids, frequently drawing attention to and concern and more than 80 complaints during her time representing District 9, which covers the southern part of Salt Lake County and the northern part of Utah County. Her posts have often targeted marginalized groups, particularly the LGBTQ plus community. Klein's first controversial social media post came less than a month into her tenure. So in 2020, well, you know, you got November 2020. What was going on then? Yeah. And mocked LGBTQ students and the Black Lives Matter movement. So no, it's not. There's no confluence of prejudice here. Most recently, and that was said ironically, by the way. Most recently, she was criticized last fall for a Facebook post where she accused teachers of being, quote, complicit in the grooming of children, unquote, and, quote, brainwashing them into queer, gender-bending ideologies. She was cleared of any wrongdoing in that after a review. Folks, when people talk about systemic something, this is it. Whether it's racism, transphobia. This is it. This is institutionalized. The board's leadership has once reprimanded Klein in fall 2021, marking the first time a state school board member has ever been disciplined. Well, bully for them. Maybe they ought to get on it more frequently. That came after Klein. What did she do? Posted a message critical of LGBTQ students that led some of her followers to do what? What did they do, staff? Threaten violence. Outside of that, the board's leadership has also often issued statements distancing itself from Klein. You're having lunch with a bigot. You're mostly covering up for the bigot. You've distanced yourself. How exactly? By pushing your seat away from the table? No. By kicking her off the seat at the table? No. By clucking and saying, gee, isn't it terrible what's happening to the poor students who were threatened with violence because of what our board members said. Thanks. Cleared of any wrongdoing. Disciplined once in 2021. And now here in 2024, a high school kid requires police protection because of what this person said. And that high school kid isn't even trans. Not that it would be any better if that student was trans. Imagine they're doing this to a cisgender girl. Imagine what they do to transgender girls. Imagine the blank check that's out there. For kids today. They remind me so much of the transgender girl I was. $60 years ago. Okay, but distancing itself from Klein, including when she shared the name of a teacher she was she believed was instructing students that communism is better than our form of government. Again, people, this is like, reminds me of 60 years ago. Seriously. We are in a position now of having to relitigate all of the fucking arguments we have had since the in some cases, since the 1850s. And when are we gonna insist that it stop? When are we just simply gonna say, you want to have an argument about slavery? You want to have an argument about women's suffrage, right to the franchise? You want to have an argument about communism? Go read a history book. And get back to me. You want to insist that I have this argument again? No, I'm going to be emphatic and say we have had this discussion. We are not going to go back and question whether segregation or slavery or discrimination against LGBTQ people. We are not going to have that discussion. We are going to say we've made that move. I mean, I think it's incumbent upon us to have a certain degree of that at least the level of militancy that our ancestors had in settling these issues for us. We've become so complacent. That we have let so much of this slip to the point where it is now being relitigated. And we've been tricked into having to have this kind of conversation. Several responded by calling on social media for the teacher to be fired. Several of this person's Klein's followers. Oh, she drums them up and starts up a campaign to get the teachers fired and urging the teacher to leave the country. They're calling for people to go into exile. Perhaps they might recall that Ayn Rand was an exile from communism. You're asking someone who is accused, McCarthy style, of harboring communist sympathies and calling upon that person to put themselves into exile. Her post Tuesday appears to be the first where she's targeted a specific minor, I'm going to add minor, like under 18, the people she ostensibly wants to protect with her bigoted positions of doing it for children's safety, and you put this child at risk to the point where she needs police protection because of your followers. Post Tuesday appears to be the first one. She's targeted a specific student. She apologized for that, saying it created a firestorm around one of the players pictured. Personal information as well as derogatory comments about that player were made by several commenters. Birkeland also commented on that updated post from Klein, adding, it is not brave or responsible to attack someone based on their outward appearance, especially when it's a child. It's horrible. Well, yes, Ms. Birkeland, sponsor of the legislation that gave these people carte blanche to do exactly that. It is not brave or responsible to attack someone on their outward appearance, especially when it's a child. It is horrible, but you made it possible. You and the rest of the state legislature and the governor of the state of Utah have made it your dictate to do exactly that and to open it up to any member of the public to make similar accusations and cause a similar firestorm. Do you not see that in the name of protection, you are putting people's lives at risk? No, you don't. The lawmaker said if the player were her child, she'd be talking to an attorney about Klein's attack. Well, no shit you would. When it comes up to you, not my problem until it's your problem. And you created a situation, you created an atmosphere under which I pray it becomes your problem. I pray you become affected by it. I mean, Niemöller's poem is way too overquoted, but Jesus Christ, you can see it happening in real life here. Several groups also spoke out against Klein's post, with Equality Utah describing it a new level of depravity and bullying and calling for her resignation. They said Klein is harming the children she was elected as a school board member to represent. Klein's post perpetuates a modern-day witch hunt where hysterical adults police the bodies of children to determine if they are masculine or feminine enough. This is exactly right. The LGBTQ plus group's leadership wrote, no child, be they straight, gay, or transgender, or cisgender, should be, I'm adding that, should be mocked, doxxed, and humiliated by elected officials or anyone, or aggrieved parents or aggrieved other kids because they want to say, I was beaten out of this unfairly, and the accusation goes to a cis kid. It's just it's legitimizing the demonization of trans individuals, trans people. And causing, it really just sort of incentivizing cis people to say, I'm not trans. Because trans bad. It's creating an atmosphere that just don't flow in the direction of justice, in the direction of humanity, of empathy. Darlene McDonald, an activist and director of One Utah Project, said on X, shitter, that she's worried about the student identified by Klein. She goddamn well ought to be, so are the police. But she also said Birkeland is at least partly responsible for those kinds of accusations. Posts like this targets individuals and puts their lives physically and emotionally at risk, McDonald wrote. McDonald said this kind of behavior is spurred by Republican lawmakers, specifically naming Birkeland when they target transgender individuals with legislation. The state also passed this session, and the governor signed last month a bill banning transgender Utahns for using the bathrooms and locker rooms in government buildings. That was also sponsored by Birkeland. So Birkeland's got problems with where trans people play, where trans people go to relieve themselves, where trans people perform the vital functions of living anywhere in public. And doesn't bother to think that there might be consequences, because how do you know? We can always tell, right? What is the mechanism for enforcement? In the case of the latter bill, I've done some reading on this one too. The only provisions for enforcement is anybody can call the cops on anybody they perceive as being in the wrong bathroom. Now, if some lawmaker decides that they have carte blanche to go after a 15-year-old kid, what do you think's going to happen in Utah's public facilities? This isn't just going to affect trans people. It certainly isn't. But it's certainly going to more outstandingly affect women than men, because our society is fundamentally misogynistic, and trans misogyny is part of that. People are going to be policing what it is to look like, to behave like, to act like, to sound like, to be like, or to even be a woman. And who's going to be making those definitions? Some cop. Likely male, likely white, likely, This is the giving permission as to who is worthy to do some of the most fundamental things in a person's life, like biological functions. A lot of folks like me have been saying, since this big push started, in my recollection, at least I think, I didn't see this level of legal action prior to 2016. But it's been nonstop ever since. With Heritage Foundation, Americans Defending Freedom, crafting these bills, introducing these bills. In October 2018, Trump's attempt to put on the Federal Register regulations under the Department of Health and Human Services to define sex as immutable and defined at birth, which never went anywhere. But I swear to God, it's in the program for the 2025 thing that the Heritage Foundation just published. This is in there. So if Utah is a laboratory for democracy, well, I think that what might escape from that particular laboratory might be on the same kind of level as what people alleged escaped from the Wuhan labs. Only this time it won't be the virus of COVID or any other virus. This time will be, again, an incubation of the virus of intolerance, of racism, of queer phobia generally, the virus of privilege against those who do not share it. And last year, legislators banned gender-affirming treatment for minors here. Yep, and they're gonna go after gender-affirming care for anyone. Both McDonald and Equality Utah worry that posts and attacks like Klein's, as well as confrontations, will increase. McDonald mentioned to Utah Governor Spencer Cox's push to limit children's access to social media. She said, that does nothing to protect them from the parents and elected officials like Natalie Klein that is target them on social media. But even with the renewed outcry, the Utah State Board of Education's leadership has repeatedly said it does not have the power to unseat Klein as an elected official. Members are elected to serve 4-year terms. Klein's term is up this November, and she's filed to run again. She faces Amanda B. Bollinger, who's running as a Republican, and is a longtime administrator in Jordan School District. Two will face off in the party's primary. Will Shiflett, who oversees a business program at Salt Lake Community College, has filed as the sole Democrat in the race. So that's the story. I don't live in Utah. Anybody who does, I don't know what you can do, but you got to do something. We've got to do something. I've often said, things look different from when you're at the tip of the spear. And this is why. And while we, folks like me, kids like I was when I was a kid, are the targets now, the shots are going to miss. This kind of misguided legislative imposition of forced people, well, I don't want to be any forced femininity. This is exactly that. These are guidelines around gender performance that will redound to considerations of who's doing it properly and who's not. And who will be making those judgments? And will it matter? Because it seems to me that at the moment, the people that are making the judgments are completely ad hoc, and they stir up a mob of people who agree with them. And that this person is not, not worthy to play on a girls' basketball team. This person is too butch to take a piss in the ladies' room. This person is too blah, blah, blah. This is an expansive thing. Given the fact that trans people make up a very, very small percentage of the population, it will affect cis people far more, and predominantly cis women. And the jujitsu that will be played by the right-wingers, as you saw earlier in this piece, isn't it too bad that we have to worry about this because of transgender ideology? Which doesn't exist. I mean, the simple statement that there are people alive who are uncomfortable identifying with or being the sex assigned at birth, gender assigned at birth. It's just a fact. There aren't many of us, but we exist, and we always have. And it is, while that may challenge the broader society's notion of sex, of gender, of all of these things, that doesn't mean that we should be eliminated or forced into being people we're not. So anyway, an exhausting read for me, and but I did want to get this out for people who might not have seen it or might not be paying attention. But this is why we're concerned. This is why these issues are of pretty serious import. And it's part of a creeping program of a sector of humanity afraid of losing the say-so and the social control of failure to recognize that they've already lost that, and they're fighting like mad to get it back. And we got to start telling these people, we're beyond that. We're not having that. The unique thing about the transgender thing is there really haven't been laws specifically about this in my entire lifetime. There were laws against cross-dressing. That's what the Compton cafeteria riots were all about. In San Francisco, you had a city ordinance that you could be arrested for wearing the wrong clothes. But this is where we're going back to. We're going to have another Compton cafeteria riot today? We're going to have to relitigate all this bullshit again? No, we've got to start telling these people, shut the fuck up. This is ridiculous. I mean, there was a story recently that a story broke, some media piece, tying Speaker of the House Mike Johnson to a particular religious movement whose stand on slavery was that it was okie dokie. Somebody asked the Speaker of the House, well, what, do you have any, you want to comment on the slavery thing? And Speaker of the House's office said, no, I don't want to comment on the issue of slavery. What? Come again? For a person who's 2 heartbeats away from the presidency to basically say, oh, I really don't want to. I don't want to tell you what my position on issues of slavery are. This is what I mean. They want to have this conversation again, and we got to tell them, no, we're not going to have this conversation again. I just see it happening all over the place. We just had a hearing in front of the U.S. Supreme Court on what the 14th Amendment means. You look at the legislative history, you look at the political context of when those amendments were first being enforced, you get a pretty good goddamn idea what it means. But this Supreme Court, I don't know if they'll agree with that. We have got to be aware that we are standing on a knife edge. and we need to get serious in our discussions, or we'll wind up living in a theocratic republic. And we might as well change the name of the goddamn country. That's it for me. We've got, in 3 minutes now, coming up on the line, the Transatlantic Calling Show. Today it's Katie Montgomery and Arden Hart. I hope you will tune in over there and join in the conversation. We'll see what people are asking about. Recently, the calls to the show have been just terrific. People who are genuinely listening, which is real refreshing. I know the last time I was on the show, that was what all the calls were. Yeah, that was back in December 28th, I think it was. But yeah, it's been a good run, and that's why the line does the show. That's what the show is there for. So tune into that. Listen to Arden and Katie, and I'll be over. I'll be over going through the watching the side chat. Make sure that people aren't Delta Bravos. Anyway, thanks a lot, folks. Talk to you later. I'm gone out of here. Hasta la vista.